All right, so I want to film a quick video here for you guys on the difference between what I call dependent and independent shallowing. A lot of people are obviously trying to get this club dropping more to the inside so that they stop getting so steep or cutting across the golf ball, especially many of you recreational golfers out there. Well, the way in which we go about it is super important. And some ways will help you to rotate better long term, some ways will not. This is why I'm always very skeptical of when you just throw an alignment stick in the way and you try to swing underneath it. Although you might, in the short term, help yourself out, you're certainly dropping the club more to the inside. You're going to help yourself to play a little bit more of a draw. That long term factor is not necessarily there sometimes. And I'll tell you why. So what do I mean by dependent or independent shallowing? Well, independent means you are shallowing the club via the arm structure, via the wrist angles, the forearms, right? The hand depth, all of these things help this club stay more inside and behind the body. You'll notice I didn't come out of my posture here. I'm doing it without the help of the body. It's independent of the pivot. So what happens is long term, I will have a lot of freedom to rotate and stay in posture, and I can still keep the club in a shallow position. Whereas dependent shallowing means I'm only shallowing the club because I'm coming out of my posture in some fashion or another. Meaning the club is actually theoretically in a steep position, but now I am kicking my pelvis forward and extending my spine excessively. So there's some element of early extension. When I do this, you'll see the club drops behind me. Or I'm excessively side bending away from the target, which means my chest is falling backwards a lot. If I do that, in theory, it is a shallowing mechanism. Well, in the short term, it's going to help you. You're still finding a way to drop the club to the inside. You're still not getting as steep on the ball. That's great. But long term, the limiting factor is you're not allowing yourself the freedom to actually rotate through the golf ball. Because the only reason the club in that scenario, in the dependent shallowing scenario, the only reason it's dropping to the inside is because of what your body is doing as a compensation. The second you take that compensation out, meaning the second you get rid of the early extension or the excessive side bending and you try to rotate, well, you no longer have that shallowing effect anymore. The club's going to get super steep again. You're going to wipe across the golf ball. So what I see a lot with players is they get the club shallowing through this dependent method, through the body, and then the second they take that dependent method out, the club gets steep again, and now they're in this vicious cycle where they're never really improving. They see some short-term success, they try to rotate better, they're back to square one, and so on and so forth. So what I would prefer is that independent method, which means I'm getting this club into a shallow position without relying on the compensation from the pivot, so that now once I actually try to rotate through the golf ball, I can keep the club on a good plane. I can still rotate, and the club doesn't just jump back immediately into a steep position. So one of these types of methods will help you in the long run to still rotate through the golf ball. One of them doesn't. This is the difference between them. So you have to be careful with how you're going about it, or else you're going to end up back to square one and going back and forth. And obviously, that's not very helpful for anyone.